Hello and welcome, everyone. Today, we have something very special for you. A collection of 50 classic fables with moral lessons that have been passed down through generations. From stories full of wisdom to fascinating adventures, each tale carries a message that will surely make you reflect. So sit back, relax, and enjoy these stories that not only entertain but also leave us with valuable life lessons. Let's get started. The Hare and the Tortoise. Once upon a time, there was a hare who was very proud of her speed. She constantly mocked the other animals who couldn't keep up with her. One day, while speaking with a tortoise, the hare laughed loudly and said, "How can you even move with such slowness? If you raced me, you wouldn't even see my tail." The tortoise, calm and confident, replied, "I may be slow, but I can beat you in a race." The hare, surprised, accepted the challenge right away. All the animals gathered to watch the race. The next day, they marked the starting line and finish line, and both competitors prepared. When the race began, the hare dashed off at full speed, leaving the tortoise far behind. But seeing how far ahead she was, the hare thought, "I have plenty of time to rest. That tortoise will take forever to catch up." So, the hare lay down under a tree and fell asleep. Meanwhile, the tortoise kept moving steadily, step by step, never stopping. Eventually, she approached the finish line while the hare was still sleeping. When the hare finally woke up, she saw the tortoise about to cross the finish line. She ran as fast as she could, but it was too late. The tortoise had won the race. Moral: consistency and determination are more valuable than arrogance and haste. The Lion and the Mouse. One day, a lion was resting in his den after a big meal. While he slept, a small, curious mouse started scurrying across his body. The lion woke up with a start and trapped the mouse under his big paw. "How dare you disturb my rest?" roared the lion, preparing to eat the mouse. The mouse, trembling with fear, begged, "Please don't kill me, great king. If you let me go, I'll repay the favor one day." The lion laughed heartily. "You, a tiny mouse, helping me, the king of the jungle? How ridiculous! But you're so small it's not worth eating you." And with that, the lion let the mouse go. A few days later, the lion fell into a hunter's trap. A net ensnared him, and no matter how much he roared and struggled, he couldn't break free. His roars reached the mouse, who ran to him. "Don't worry, friend. I'll help you." The mouse began gnawing at the net with his small teeth. Little by little, he made a hole big enough for the lion to escape. The lion, grateful, said, "I underestimated your worth, little friend. Today I learned that even the smallest can be of great help." Moral: even the smallest can be valuable at the right moment. The Fox and the Grapes. Once upon a time, a fox was walking through a vineyard searching for something to eat. Suddenly, he spotted a bunch of ripe grapes hanging from a high branch. The grapes looked juicy, and the hungry fox decided to reach them. First, he tried jumping, but he couldn't reach high enough. Then, he stepped back to gain some momentum and jumped harder, but he still couldn't reach them. The fox tried several times, but the grapes were out of his reach. Tired and frustrated, the fox looked at the bunch and said out loud, "Those grapes are probably sour and not as tasty as they look." With this excuse, the fox turned away and left, though he was still hungry. Moral: we often belittle what we cannot obtain. The Grasshopper and the Ant. In the warm summer, a grasshopper spent her days happily singing under the sun, carefree and joyful. Meanwhile, an ant worked tirelessly, gathering food and storing it in her anthill for the winter. "Dear ant," the grasshopper said one day, "why are you working so hard? Come sing with me and enjoy the summer." But the ant, without stopping, replied, "I'm preparing provisions for the winter. When the cold comes, there will be no food, and I don't want to go hungry." The grasshopper laughed and kept singing. She didn't want to worry about the future. Months later, winter arrived, and the forest was covered in snow. The grasshopper, with nothing to eat, went to the ant's anthill and begged, "Please give me some food. I'm starving." The ant, remembering the summer, replied, "While I worked, you sang. Now that I have food, you should have thought about the future." And she shut the anthill's door, leaving the grasshopper to fend for herself. Moral: it's important to work and prepare for the future before it's too late. The Selfish Tree. Once upon a time, there was a tree in a forest that was very selfish. It was big and sturdy, producing many juicy fruits. However, the tree didn't want to share its fruits or shade with the animals in the forest. Whenever any animal came to ask for a bit of shade or a fruit to eat, the tree would respond, "No, this is mine." Over time, the tree realized it was alone. While watching the other trees and animals helping each other, it began to feel sad. One day, a little bird that had no place to build its nest asked the tree for a spot among its branches. Though the tree hesitated at first, it decided to give it a chance. The bird built its nest, and in gratitude, sang sweet songs for the tree every day. Soon, other animals approached, and the tree began to share its fruits and shade. It discovered that by helping others, it also felt happier and less lonely. In the end, the tree understood that true happiness lies in sharing and being generous. Moral: true happiness lies in sharing and being generous with others. The goose that lays the golden eggs. Once upon a time, a farmer and his wife owned a special hen. Every day, this hen laid a golden egg. The eggs were valuable, and over time, the couple became very wealthy. At first, they were very grateful for the hen, but over time, they grew greedy. They said to each other, "If this hen lays one golden egg every day, how many golden eggs must she have inside? If we could get all the eggs at once, we'd be rich instantly." So, blinded by greed, they decided to kill the hen to get all the golden eggs at once. However, when they opened the bird, they found no eggs inside. The hen was dead, and with her, their source of wealth was gone. The couple was left with nothing and deeply regretted their greed. Moral: greed can lead us to lose what we already have. The wind and the sun. One day, the wind and the sun began arguing about who was stronger. The wind said, "I'm the strongest. I can topple trees and blow roofs off houses." But the sun replied, "I have more power. My warmth gives life to the world and can melt even the hardest ice." To settle the debate, they decided on a challenge. They saw a traveler walking along a path, wrapped in his coat. "Whoever can make the traveler remove his coat will be the strongest," proposed the sun. The wind went first. Blowing with all his might, he tried to tear the coat off the man. But the harder the wind blew, the tighter the traveler held his coat against his body, shivering from the cold. After much effort, the wind gave up. Then it was the sun's turn. Gently at first, he began to shine, gradually increasing his warmth. Feeling warmer, the traveler loosened his coat. As the sun shone more intensely, the man finally took off his coat completely and carried it over his arm. The sun smiled at the wind and said, "Kindness and warmth are more effective than force and violence." Moral: gentleness and kindness can achieve more than brute force. The Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there were three little pigs who decided to build their own houses to protect themselves from the big bad wolf roaming the forest. Each had a different idea about how to build their home. The youngest pig, lazy and eager to finish quickly, decided to build his house out of straw. "It's easy to make and won't take much time," he said happily. The second pig, a bit more hardworking but not too much, chose to build his house out of wood. "It's stronger than straw, but it won't take as much effort as a brick house," he thought. The third pig, the oldest and wisest, decided to build his house out of bricks. Though he knew it would take time and effort, he wanted a solid house that could withstand any attack. When they finished, the wolf appeared, hungry and determined to eat the pigs. He first approached the straw house and shouted, little pig, let me in." "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." The pig replied from inside, "Then I'll huff and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." The wolf huffed and puffed, and the straw house collapsed. The pig ran to his brother's wooden house. The wolf reached the wooden house and repeated his threat. Little pigs, let me in." "Not by the hair of our chinny chin chins." The pigs replied, "Then I'll huff and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down." The wolf huffed and puffed, and though it took a bit longer, the wooden house also fell apart. The two pigs ran to their older brother's brick house. When the wolf arrived at the brick house, he made his usual threat. But no matter how much he huffed and puffed, the brick house didn't budge an inch. Enraged, the wolf tried to enter through the chimney, but the oldest pig had a pot of boiling water waiting for him. When the wolf slid down the chimney, he fell straight into the pot and ran off howling in pain, vowing never to return. The three pigs celebrated their victory and learned that hard work and preparation always pay off. Moral: Hard work and foresight yield better results than laziness and shortcuts. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Little Red Riding Hood because she always wore a red cape that her grandmother had made for her. One day, her mother asked her to take a basket of food to her grandmother, who was sick and lived in a small house in the forest. "Don't dawdle or talk to strangers," her mother warned. Little Red Riding Hood was cheerfully walking through the forest when she encountered a wolf. "Where are you going, little girl?" the wolf asked in a friendly voice. "I'm going to my grandmother's house to take her this basket of food," Little Red Riding Hood replied without thinking. The cunning wolf devised a plan. "Why don't you pick some flowers for your grandmother? She would love them," he suggested. While Little Red Riding Hood was picking flowers, the wolf ran to the grandmother's house. He knocked on the door, and when the grandmother asked who it was, he answered, imitating Little Red Riding Hood's voice, "It's me, Grandma." The wolf entered, ate the grandmother, and disguised himself in her clothes. Then he got into bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood. When the girl arrived, she noticed something strange about her grandmother. "Grandma, what big eyes you have." "They are to see you better, dear," replied the wolf. "Grandma, what big ears you have." "They are to hear you better, dear." "Grandma, what big teeth you have." "They are to eat you better." The wolf jumped out of the bed and tried to grab Little Red Riding Hood, but she screamed for help. A lumberjack passing by heard the screams and ran to the house. He struck the wolf, drove him out of the house, and freed the grandmother who was trapped in the closet. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother hugged each other gratefully, and the girl promised never to speak to strangers again. Moral: always listen to the advice of your elders and be cautious of strangers. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there was a poor woodcutter who lived in the forest with his 2 children, Hansel and Gretel, and his wicked wife. One year, during a terrible famine, the woman said to the woodcutter, "We don't have enough food for everyone. We must abandon the children in the forest, or we will all starve." Though the woodcutter opposed the idea, he eventually agreed with a heavy heart. Hansel overheard the conversation and collected shiny pebbles, which he kept in his pocket. The next morning, the stepmother led the children deep into the forest and left them there. But Hansel had dropped the pebbles along the way, and when night fell, the children followed the trail of stones back home. Furious, the stepmother insisted on taking them even farther the next day. This time, Hansel couldn't gather pebbles, so he left breadcrumbs along the path. But when they tried to follow the trail, they discovered birds had eaten all the crumbs. Lost in the forest, Hansel and Gretel wandered until they found a house made of gingerbread, candy, and chocolate. Hungry, they began to eat pieces of the house when suddenly an old woman appeared. "Come in, my dears. I'll give you more food," she said with a smile. However, the old woman was an evil witch who planned to eat them. She locked Hansel in a cage and forced Gretel to do chores while she fattened up her brother. One day, the witch told Gretel to light the oven to cook Hansel. But Gretel, clever as ever, pretended not to know how. "Can you show me how to do it?" she asked. Impatient, the witch leaned over the oven to demonstrate, and Gretel pushed her inside, quickly closing the door. The witch died, and the children found a chest full of jewels in the house. Hansel and Gretel returned home with the treasure, where they found that their stepmother had died. With the jewels, they lived happily ever after with their father. Moral: courage and cleverness can overcome adversity. The Ugly Duckling. On a quiet lake, a mother duck was waiting for her eggs to hatch. One by one, the eggs cracked open, revealing beautiful yellow ducklings. All except one. The last one was larger, gray, and clumsy. The other animals in the farmyard teased him. "What an ugly duckling," they said. Even his own siblings rejected him, and the poor duckling decided to run away. He wandered alone for months, enduring the cold winter and loneliness. When spring arrived, the duckling came to a lake where he saw a group of majestic swans. He thought, "How beautiful they are! I wish I could be like them, but they will surely reject me." Full of sadness, he bent over the water to look at his reflection. But instead of his gray, clumsy image, he saw a young and beautiful swan. He realized he had always been a swan but didn't know it. The other swans welcomed him with joy, and the duckling, now full of confidence, lived happily among them. Moral: it doesn't matter how things start. What matters is what you become. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, There was a beautiful princess named Snow White, whose stepmother, the queen, was extremely vain. The queen had a magic mirror that always told her she was the fairest in the land. But one day the mirror replied, "Queen, you are fair, but Snow White is the fairest of all." Overcome with jealousy, the queen ordered a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. However, the huntsman couldn't do it and told Snow White to run away and never return. Snow White wandered through the forest until she found a small cottage, where 7 dwarfs lived and worked in a nearby mine. After hearing her story, the dwarfs offered her shelter. "You can stay here, but you must be careful of the queen." The queen, discovering that Snow White was still alive, disguised herself as an old peddler and brought her a poisoned apple. When Snow White took a bite, she fell into a deep sleep. The dwarfs, heartbroken, placed her in a glass coffin in the forest. Some time later, a prince passing by saw Snow White and fell in love with her. When he kissed her, the spell broke, and Snow White woke up. Snow White and the prince married and lived happily ever after, while the queen was punished for her wickedness. Moral: kindness and purity always triumph over envy and evil. The Princess and the Pea. Once upon a time, there was a prince who wanted to marry a true princess. He traveled the world searching for someone who met his ideals, but he always found some flaw in the candidates. Sad, he returned to his castle, thinking he would never find the perfect princess. One night, during a terrible storm, someone knocked on the castle door. When they opened it, they found a young woman drenched, with tattered clothes and wet hair. "I am a princess," the young woman declared. The queen, the prince's mother, decided to test if she was a true princess. She prepared a bed with 20 mattresses stacked on top of each other, and under the very last one, she placed a tiny pea. "If she feels the pea, we'll know she is a true princess, for only royal blood can be so sensitive," thought the queen. The next morning, they asked the young woman how she had slept. "Terribly," she said. "Something hard in the bed kept me from resting. I'm covered in bruises." The queen and the prince rejoiced. This was clear proof she was a true princess. The prince married her, and they lived happily ever after. Moral: true nobility cannot be hidden. It always reveals itself. The brave little tailor. Once upon a time, there was a little tailor who was sewing while eating jam. Several flies started bothering him, and with one swift blow, he killed 7 in one strike. "What a feat!" he exclaimed. Killing 7 in one blow deserves to be known around the world. He made a belt with the words, "Killed 7 in one blow," and set out to explore the world. Along the way, he met a giant and showed him his belt. The giant thought he had killed 7 men and wanted to test his strength. "If you're so strong, squeeze the stone until water comes out," the giant said. The little tailor, clever as ever, took a piece of cheese and squeezed it until liquid came out. "Now you try," he challenged. The giant, astonished, wanted another test. He asked the tailor to throw a stone as far as he could. Instead of a stone, the tailor threw a bird, which flew far away. "Now it's your turn," he said. Impressed, the giant admitted the tailor was stronger. Later, the tailor arrived in a kingdom where 2 giants were terrorizing the region. The king promised whoever defeated them would marry his daughter. The tailor tricked the giants into fighting each other until they both fell. The king, reluctant to keep his promise, set more challenges, but the tailor overcame them all with his wit. Finally, the king gave him his daughter, and the tailor lived happily as a hero. Moral: intelligence and cleverness can outmatch brute strength. The emperor's new clothes. Once upon a time, there was an emperor who cared deeply about his clothes. He loved dressing in fine clothing and spent all his money on new outfits. One day, 2 cunning swindlers arrived in the kingdom, and upon learning of the emperor's obsession with fashion, they devised a plan. They approached the emperor and said, "We are 2 very skilled tailors, and we can make for you the most beautiful suit ever created. But the best part is that this suit has a magical quality. Only intelligent people can see it." Excited by the idea, the emperor gave them a large sum of money and asked them to make the suit. The swindlers pretended to sew for days, but in reality they were doing nothing, as there was no suit at all. The emperor, unwilling to admit he could see nothing, sent several ministers to inspect the work. The ministers, fearing they would be seen as foolish or incompetent, also pretended to see the suit. Finally, the emperor, unwilling to seem ignorant, decided to try on the suit. When he looked in the mirror, he realized he was completely naked, but he didn't say anything for fear of looking foolish. One day, when the emperor walked through the streets to show off his new suit, a little child, without any embarrassment, shouted, "The emperor is naked!" The people began to whisper, and finally, the emperor, ashamed, realized he had been deceived. But it was too late to turn back, so he continued walking through the streets, though with much less pride than before. Moral: vanity and the fear of admitting the truth can lead us into ridicule. John without fear. Once upon a time, there was a boy named John who, unlike other children, was not afraid of anything. His mother, worried about his lack of fear, said to him one day, "John, you should be afraid of something. There are many things in the world that can scare you." But John replied, "I'm not afraid of anything." One day he decided to go out into the world and face all the fears that people feared. First, he came to a cave that was known to be inhabited by a dragon. The villagers always told terrifying stories about the dragon, but John decided to face it. When he reached the cave, he found the dragon sleeping, and instead of running away, he went in and mocked it. The dragon, surprised, woke up, but John challenged it fearlessly and came out unharmed. Next, John ventured into a dark and eerie forest where it was said a horrible ghost roamed. But John, as brave as always, was not afraid of the ghost and confronted it. The ghost tried to scare him, but John bravely answered back, and the ghost vanished. Finally, John arrived at a castle where it was rumored there was a fierce ogre. Without hesitation, John entered the castle, challenged the ogre, and after an intense fight, emerged victorious. In the end, John returned home, where his mother asked what he had learned. "I've learned that fear only exists in people's minds," John replied. Moral: fear only has power if we allow it. Bravery doesn't mean not being afraid, but facing it with determination. The Frog and the Scorpion. Once, a scorpion approached a frog and asked for help. "Please help me cross the river," he said. "I cannot swim, and I would die if I stay here." The frog, who didn't trust the scorpion, replied, "Why should I help you? You are a scorpion, and you could sting me at any moment." The scorpion assured her, "I won't do anything to you, I promise. If I sting you, we'll both die." "I don't want that." Convinced by the scorpion's promise, the frog agreed to carry him on her back and began to swim. As they crossed the river, in the middle of the current, the scorpion stung the frog. "Why did you do it?" the frog shouted, feeling the poison spread through her body. The scorpion, already regretful, replied, "I'm sorry, but I couldn't help it. It's my nature." Both began to sink into the water, and before the frog died, she understood that sometimes, no matter how much we want to change something, our nature defines us. Moral: one's nature cannot be changed, and it may betray us when we least expect it. The Wolf and the 7 Goats. Once upon a time, a goat had 7 little kids, whom she loved dearly. One day, the goat had to go to the forest to gather food, so she warned her children, "Don't open the door to anyone, especially the wolf, because he knows how to disguise himself and can deceive you." The wolf, overhearing the warning, came up with a plan. He went to the bakery and coated his paws with flour so they looked white. Then he went to the little goat's house and knocked on the door. "Open, my children. It's your mother," he said in a soft voice. But the little goats, suspecting the wolf, looked at his paws through the crack in the door and saw they were white, like their mother's. They thought it was her, but did not open the door. The wolf, furious, went to the shop and bought chalk to make his paws look white. He returned to the house of the little goats, showed them his white paws, and told them it was their mother. Trusting the wolf's voice, the little goats opened the door and let him in. The wolf swallowed the little goats one by one, but when he went to eat the smallest one, he hid in a closet. Later, the goat returned home and saw what had happened. She decided to rescue her children. They went to the forest, where the wolf was sleeping under a tree, his belly huge and full of the little goats. The goat and her children pulled the little goats out of the wolf's stomach, filled it with stones, and left him there. When the wolf woke up and went to drink water, the stones made him fall into the river, where he drowned. The goat and her 7 little kids lived happily and safely, never again letting the wolf get close. Moral: distrust of deceit can save us from many dangers. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Goldilocks who wandered into the forest one day far from her home. As she walked, she found a cottage she didn't know. Seeing that no one was inside, she decided to enter. Inside, she found 3 bowls of soup on the table. The first was too hot, the second too cold, and the third was just right, so Goldilocks ate it all. Then, she found 3 chairs in the living room. The first was too big, the second too small, and the third was the perfect size. Goldilocks sat in the perfect chair, but when she tried to relax, the chair broke. Next, she went upstairs to find 3 beds. The first was too hard, the second too soft, and the third was just right. Goldilocks lay down in the third bed and fell asleep. Soon after, the 3 bears who lived in the cottage returned home. Papa Bear noticed someone had eaten his soup, Mama Bear saw that someone had sat in her chair, and Baby Bear discovered someone was sleeping in his bed. Goldilocks woke up to the noise and saw the 3 bears. Scared, she ran out the door and dashed into the forest, promising never to return. Moral: respect for other people's property is essential. We should never enter or take what is not ours without permission. The Happy Prince. Once upon a time, there was a statue of a prince placed on top of a pedestal in a plaza. The statue was covered in gold and precious jewels. One day, a little swallow who was on its way south stopped to rest by the statue. The swallow decided to stay for a few days before continuing its journey. As it rested, the swallow noticed that the prince, although made of gold and decorated with jewels, had a sad expression on his face. Curious, the swallow asked why he looked so sad if he had everything a statue could desire. The prince explained, "When I was alive, I lived in a palace, never leaving and never seeing the suffering of the people. Now, from here, I can see all the pain and poverty in the city." The prince asked the swallow to help alleviate the suffering of others. He asked her to take the jewels and gold from his body and distribute them to the needy. Though the swallow had to leave, she decided to stay and help the prince. Over time, the swallow carried the prince's riches to the people who needed them most. She helped a poor child, a hungry family, and a mother suffering for her sick child. As time passed, the swallow became weaker and more exhausted, but she never stopped helping. Finally, the swallow died in the prince's arms, and he, also weakened from losing his riches, broke into pieces. The city, seeing their acts of generosity and sacrifice, buried them together. Moral: true wealth is not measured in material possessions, but in generosity and love for others. Thumbling. Once upon a time, there was a very poor family living in a small house in the forest. The couple had many children, and the smallest of them all, named Tom Thumb, was so tiny that he was hardly noticeable. Though his parents loved him dearly, they thought he was too small to do anything important. One day, the family found themselves in a dire situation because they had no food. The father decided to take his children into the forest to abandon them, as they could not afford to take care of them. Tom Thumb, having overheard his parents' plans, decided to follow them without them noticing. As they walked through the forest, Tom Thumb saw that his father had dropped some white pebbles along the way. He decided to collect them and use them to mark the path. After a long day of walking, when his parents left them in the forest, Tom Thumb and his brothers realized they could follow the pebbles and return home. The next day, his father, angry, took them to the forest again, but this time Tom Thumb couldn't use the pebbles because his father had scattered breadcrumbs instead. Despite this, Tom Thumb, with his cleverness, found a way to follow the breadcrumb trail, and in the end, the children returned home once more. As time went by, the family began to prosper, and Tom Thumb became famous for his intelligence and bravery. One day, when the king asked for help to defeat an ogre who had kidnapped the princess, Tom Thumb, without fear, offered to help. With his cleverness, he defeated the ogre and rescued the princess. For his bravery, he was rewarded with riches and married the princess. Moral: never underestimate others because of their size or appearance, for bravery and intelligence are not determined by being big. The Maiden Without Hands. Once upon a time, there was a young and beautiful maiden who lived with her father. One day, a strange man came to their house and offered the young girl a deal. If she gave him what he asked for, he would grant her riches and happiness. The maiden, not knowing the man's true intentions, accepted the deal. The man asked her to give him something very precious to her, and without thinking, she gave him her hands. Immediately, the man cut them off and took them with him. The young girl, terrified and sad, was left without hands, but the man told her that she would have to wait 3 years for her hands to grow back. During those years, the maiden suffered greatly. Despite her pain, she remained true to her promise and waited patiently. After 3 years, the young girl's hands grew back, but she no longer lived in her father's house. She had to run away due to the hardships and had wandered the world searching for the truth about the deal she had made. Finally, she came across a palace where, by chance, she met a young prince. He recognized her, and the maiden explained her sad story. The prince, moved by her bravery and suffering, decided to help her. Together, they discovered that the man's deal had been a trap, and with the prince's help, the maiden was able to regain what she had lost. The man who had cut off her hands was defeated, and the young girl was able to live happily and peacefully. Eventually, she married the prince, and together they lived a life full of love and justice. Moral: sometimes sacrifices can be very painful, but patience and bravery can bring the reward and justice we deserve. The Giving Tree. Once upon a time, there was a tree that grew in a forest. The tree was very tall and strong, and throughout its life, it was very generous to all who approached it. A boy used to play near the tree, climbing its branches and enjoying its shade. The tree gave him everything it had without asking for anything in return. At first, the boy was very happy. He played all day, and the tree gave him apples to eat and wood to build things. However, as the boy grew older, he began to drift away from the tree, seeking other things that offered him more. One day the boy, now a young man, returned to the tree and said, "I want something more. Can you give me money or riches?" The tree, sad for not being able to give him what he asked for, offered its strongest branch so that he could build a house. The young man accepted the branch, cutting it down, and left. The tree continued to wait for his return, but a long time passed without seeing him. Finally, the young man returned, but now he was an adult, and his face was filled with worry. He said to the tree, "I now want a boat so I can sail away, as I feel lost and want to escape my troubles." The tree, though pained by the passing time, offered its trunk, which was cut to build the boat. The man left, leaving the tree with nothing but its empty trunk. Years passed, and the man, now old, came back to the tree, but this time he no longer asked for riches or material things. He approached the tree, which was now just an old, hollow trunk, and said, "I've lived a life full of worries, but now I only want to rest." The tree, although it had nothing left to give but its shade, was happy to offer what remained of itself. The man sat down to rest in its shade, and the tree, though just an empty trunk, felt fulfilled for having given everything it had. Moral: generosity is not always based on material things. The true gift is giving the best of yourself to others without expecting anything in return. The Country Mouse and the City Mouse. Once upon a time, there were 2 mice, one who lived in the countryside and another who lived in the city. The Country Mouse lived in a small burrow, surrounded by grass and trees, and enjoyed the peacefulness of the countryside. He had simple food like grains and vegetables, but he was always happy with his life. One day, the Country Mouse received a visit from his cousin, the City Mouse, who invited him to spend some time with him in the city. The City Mouse lived in a luxurious house, filled with treats such as cakes, cheeses, and exotic fruits. The Country Mouse, excited, accepted the invitation and traveled to the city. When he arrived, the City Mouse showed him his house and offered a grand dinner. They ate and drank everything, enjoying the lavish food and the comfort of the city. However, during the meal, the Country Mouse heard strange noises and saw someone approaching the house. They quickly hid, as a cat was coming near, and the City Mouse, used to city life, wasn't as frightened. The Country Mouse, terrified, asked, "Is this what you call living well? I can't bear so much danger." The next day, the Country Mouse decided to return to his home in the countryside. He said to his cousin, "Living in the city may be luxurious, but I prefer the safety and tranquility of my life in the countryside, even if my food is simpler." The City Mouse, though enjoying his wealth, understood that for the Country Mouse, peace and safety were more important than any luxury. Moral: material wealth does not always bring happiness. Sometimes, The tranquility and security of a simple life are more valuable than luxuries. Peter and the Wolf. Once upon a time, there was a young shepherd named Peter who took care of a flock of sheep on the hills near his village. Though he enjoyed his work, he was very bored being alone all day. One day, he came up with an idea to have some fun and decided to shout, "Help! The wolf is coming!" The villagers, hearing his cry, quickly ran up the hill with sticks and pitchforks, ready to scare away the wolf. But when they arrived, they found there was no wolf. Peter, laughing out loud, told them he had just been joking. The villagers were angry and left, warning Peter not to play such serious tricks. Days later, Peter got bored again and decided to shout again, "Help! The wolf is coming!" The villagers, now used to his pranks, didn't run as fast this time. When they arrived, Peter was laughing once more as there was no wolf. The villagers scolded him even more and told him not to play with such dangerous things. However, one day, the wolf really did appear. Peter, terrified, started shouting with all his might, "Help! The wolf is coming!" But this time, the villagers didn't believe him. They thought Peter was playing again and didn't come to his aid. The wolf attacked the flock, and Peter couldn't do anything to save it. By the time the villagers finally arrived, it was too late, and Peter learned an important lesson. You cannot play with the trust of others because, when you truly need help, no one will believe you. Moral: if you lie or play with the trust of others, when you really need help, no one will believe you. The Fisherman and the Goldfish. Once upon a time, there was a poor fisherman who lived in a small cottage by the sea. Every day, he cast his net into the water, hoping to catch something to feed his family. One day, while casting his net, he felt a very strong tug. When he pulled up the net, he discovered that he had caught a golden fish, which said, "Please let me go. I am a magical fish, and if you release me, I will grant you one wish." The fisherman, surprised, thought for a moment, and after a bit of reflection, decided to release the fish. The golden fish, grateful, said, "Thank you for releasing me. Ask for a wish, and I will grant it." The fisherman, who had little wealth, thought about his family and what he desired most. He said, "I wish for a larger house for my family, so that we can live comfortably." The golden fish nodded and disappeared into the water. The next day, the fisherman woke up to find that his small cottage had transformed into a beautiful house with everything his family needed. The fisherman and his wife were very happy, but the wife, seeing the new house, thought they could ask for more. She said to her husband, "Go ask the golden fish for an even larger house with riches." The fisherman hesitated, but eventually went to the shore and called the golden fish. The fish appeared, and the fisherman asked for what his wife wanted. The fish granted the wish, but the wife didn't stop there. She wanted to be the richest and most powerful woman in the world. So, she asked the fish to make her a queen. The fisherman, still doubtful, went back to the sea and asked the fish to grant his wife's wish. The fish agreed but warned them not to ask for more. Finally, the wife asked to be the queen of the entire world, the most powerful woman to ever exist. When the fisherman returned to the sea with this request, the golden fish did not appear. Instead, the sea was calm and empty, and the fisherman returned to his home, which had turned back into a small cottage. The fisherman and his wife learned that unlimited desire can lead to ruin, and that greed never brings true happiness. Moral: it's not always wise to ask for more than what you need, as greed can lead to losing what you already have. The Bremen Town Musicians. Once upon a time, there was an old donkey who, after many years of serving his master, was thrown out of the farm because he was no longer able to work. Sad and unsure of what to do, the donkey decided to go to Bremen to become a musician. As he walked through the forest, he came across a dog who was also sad. The dog explained that his master had kicked him out because he was too old to hunt like before. The donkey said, "If you want, come with me to Bremen, and we can be musicians together." Soon after, they found a cat who had also been kicked out by her owner because she no longer caught mice. The donkey and the dog invited the cat to join them on their journey to Bremen. Later, they came across a rooster who had been expelled from the farm because his crowing was no longer appreciated. The donkey, the dog, and the cat invited the rooster to join their group, and together they set off for Bremen. Upon reaching a house in the woods, they saw that inside there was a band of thieves. The rooster began to crow loudly, the dog barked, the cat meowed, and the donkey brayed all at once. The noise was so loud that the thieves, frightened, ran away from the house. The four animals entered the house and decided to stay there. From then on, they lived happily ever after, and they never made it to Bremen, as they had found a home where they were very happy. Moral: unity is strength. Sometimes working together as a team helps us overcome difficulties. Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, there was a king and queen who, after many years of waiting, had a daughter. On the day of her christening, they invited all the fairies in the kingdom to give gifts to the baby. However, they forgot to invite an evil fairy. When the evil fairy arrived at the feast, she cursed the girl, saying, "The day she turns 15, she will prick her finger on a spindle and fall into a deep sleep that will last for 100 years. Despite this curse, a good fairy appeared and softened the curse, saying that although the princess would fall into a deep sleep, she would be awakened by the kiss of a prince. The princess's parents did everything they could to prevent the tragedy. They ordered all the spindles in the kingdom to be destroyed, but as the evil fairy had predicted, the princess pricked her finger on a spindle on her 15th birthday and fell into a deep sleep. The princess was taken to a tower, and the king and queen, heartbroken, retired. Many years passed, and one day, a young prince heard about the sleeping princess and decided to go search for her. When he arrived at the castle, he found the tower surrounded by thorns. He didn't give up and fought through the thorns to reach the castle. When he saw the princess, he kissed her, and as the good fairy had said, the princess woke up. The prince and the princess got married and lived happily ever after. Moral: true love can overcome any curse or difficulty. Alice in Wonderland. Alice was a curious and dreamy girl who one day, while sitting by the river with her sister, saw a white rabbit with a watch in its hand. Surprised, she decided to follow the rabbit, which entered a rabbit hole. Without thinking, Alice jumped after him and, falling down the hole, ended up in a strange and wonderful world called Wonderland. In this new place, Alice encountered many strange creatures and fantastic settings. First, she drank from a bottle that said "Drink me" and grew to an enormous size. Then, she ate a cake that said "Eat me," and she shrank down to a tiny size. With each change in size, she met new characters like the White Rabbit, the Mad Hatter, the March Hare, the Queen of Hearts, and many more. During her journey, Alice had to face various challenges, such as attending a chaotic tea party with the Mad Hatter, playing croquet with the Queen of Hearts, and solving riddles and mysteries. Despite the confusion and the strange rules of Wonderland, Alice never lost her curiosity or her ability to question the world around her. Finally, after a series of madness and bizarre encounters, Alice realized that everything had been a dream. When she woke up, she found herself back next to her sister, wondering if everything she had experienced had been real or just a fantasy. Moral: curiosity and imagination are valuable, but we must also learn to maintain control and distinguish reality from fantasy. Pinocchio. Once upon a time, there was a carpenter named Geppetto who wished to have a child. One day, he carved a wooden puppet and named it Pinocchio. To his surprise, a magical fairy brought the puppet to life. Pinocchio became a wooden boy who could move and talk, but he was still not a real boy. Geppetto, overjoyed, treated him as his own son. However, Pinocchio was very mischievous, and although he always meant well, he often got into trouble. On his way to school, Pinocchio was tempted and decided to go off with a group of evil puppets. As time went by, Pinocchio made wrong decisions such as lying, disobeying his father, and not studying. Every time he told a lie, his nose grew longer and longer. The magical fairy would help him but warned him that only by being brave, honest, and kind could he become a real boy. Throughout his adventures, Pinocchio had to face monsters, liars, and dangers, but little by little he began to learn life's lessons. Finally, after many trials and tribulations, Pinocchio showed real change in his behavior. One day, when Geppetto was swallowed by a giant whale, Pinocchio showed great bravery in saving him. The fairy, seeing his courage and goodness, rewarded him by turning him into a real boy. From then on, Pinocchio was an obedient and loving boy, and he lived happily with his father. Moral: honesty, bravery, and kindness are the values that help us become better people. The man who wanted to change the wind. Once upon a time, There was a man who lived in a small village where the wind constantly blew, bringing dust and dirt. The man was so tired of this wind that he decided he would do everything possible to change it. He thought that if he could control the wind, his life and the lives of everyone in the village would be much better. The man began to build a huge device with all sorts of mechanisms that were supposed to change the direction of the wind. Days, weeks, and months passed as the man worked tirelessly, obsessed with the idea of controlling nature. Finally, after much effort, the man completed his machine. With great excitement, he activated the device and waited for the wind to change, but something strange happened. The wind didn't stop or change direction. The man realized that, no matter how hard he tried to control the wind, it could not be manipulated by his will. Desperate, the man sat down to rest, and that's when he heard a soft breeze whisper to him, "Sometimes the best thing we can do is learn to live with what we cannot change." The man understood that nature couldn't be controlled, and that he needed to learn to coexist with it instead of trying to change it. Moral: there are things in life that we cannot control, and wisdom lies in learning to accept and adapt to them. The Horse and the Donkey. Once upon a time, there was a horse and a donkey that lived on a farm. Both were working animals, but the horse always boasted about being much stronger and faster than the donkey. The horse, proud of his strength, felt superior and made fun of the donkey, who was smaller and slower. One day, the farmer ordered them to carry a heavy load of hay to the market. Eager to show off his strength, the horse accepted the task without complaint. The donkey, seeing the heavy load, felt worried but accepted his part of the work with humility. As they traveled along the road, the horse began to feel tired from the heavy load, as his effort took its toll. The donkey, on the other hand, wasn't complaining and moved steadily along, without rushing or boasting. The horse, exhausted, asked the donkey to help him. Despite the horse's previous teasing, the donkey, without hesitation, agreed to help the horse carry some of the load. In the end, both animals reached the market, although the horse was much more tired than the donkey. The horse learned that strength is not always the best quality, and sometimes it's better to be steady and humble like the donkey. Moral: humility and consistency are more important than strength or vanity. The Raven and the Jug. A very thirsty crow was flying over the field, looking for something to drink. After a long time with no water in sight, he saw a jar on the ground with a bit of water at the bottom. However, the jar had a narrow neck, and the crow couldn't reach the water. The crow thought for a moment and decided to do something very clever. He began to collect small stones and, one by one, dropped them into the jar. As the stones piled up, the water level gradually rose. In the end, the water reached high enough for the crow to drink. Satisfied and relieved, the crow flew to a nearby tree, happy to have found a solution to his problem with intelligence and perseverance. Moral: with intelligence and patience, problems that seem impossible can be solved. The Fox and the Crow. A crow found a very delicious piece of cheese, and proud of his discovery, he took it in his beak and perched on a tree branch. He knew that this cheese was a treat and didn't want to share it with anyone. However, a fox who was passing by saw the crow with the cheese and thought of a plan to get it. The fox approached the tree and, seeing the crow, said, "How beautiful you are, Crow! Your feathers are so bright, your song so melodious. Surely you are the king of the birds. Could you sing for me?" The crow, flattered by the fox's compliments, completely forgot about the piece of cheese in his beak. He decided that he should sing to show off his beautiful voice. He opened his beak, and as he did, the cheese fell to the ground. The fox, very sly, quickly grabbed the piece of cheese and ate it. The crow, realizing his mistake, learned that we shouldn't always be swayed by flattery and that vanity can make us lose what we have. Moral: don't let empty compliments distract you from what truly matters. The Lion and the Dolphin. On the shores of the sea, a lion was walking along the beach, enjoying the warm sun. However, suddenly he tripped over a rock and fell into the water. The lion didn't know how to swim, and with the strength of the waves he was carried far from the shore. Desperate, he struggled to stay afloat, but his large paws couldn't propel him in the water. Just when the lion was beginning to lose hope, a dolphin appeared. The dolphin, seeing the lion's distress, swam quickly towards him. "Don't be afraid," said the dolphin. "I will help you out of this sea." With great skill, The dolphin took the lion by the mane and guided him back to the shore, where the lion was able to rest and be safe. The lion, grateful for the dolphin's help, offered his friendship and promised that he would always be his friend. The dolphin, who was very intelligent, accepted the lion's friendship without hesitation. Later, the lion found himself back on the same shore when a group of hunters surrounded him with their nets. The lion, unable to free himself, began to roar loudly, but the hunters mocked him, knowing he couldn't escape. Suddenly, the dolphin heard the roars and swam toward him quickly. Seeing his friend in trouble, the dolphin devised a plan. He swam around the nets and, with his sharp vision, found a way to untangle the knots in the traps. After a while, the lion was free. The lion, once again indebted to the dolphin, thanked him deeply and promised that he would always protect him. Moral: true friendship is based on mutual help, regardless of the differences between beings. The firefly and the snake. A firefly lived in a small forest and enjoyed shining at night, lighting the way with her glow. Although she was small, she felt very important because her light helped many animals find their way in the darkness. Throughout the forest, all the animals respected the firefly for her bright light. One day, while flying near the ground, the firefly encountered a snake. The snake, seeing her shine, approached and said, "What a bright light you have, little firefly! However, I am much more powerful than you. I am the queen of this forest, and all the animals fear me. How important can you be compared to me?" The firefly, feeling hurt by the snake's words, decided to show her how valuable she was. However, the snake only smiled disdainfully and said, "It doesn't matter how bright you are because there will always be something bigger and stronger than you." The firefly, feeling she couldn't compete with the snake, flew back to her cave. A few days passed, and the firefly saw that the snake had fallen into a trap set by hunters. The snake was struggling to free herself but was stuck. The firefly, seeing her friend the snake in danger, flew close and began to shine with all her brilliance. In the distance, the hunters saw the bright light and decided to investigate. As they approached, they saw the snake trapped and freed her, unaware that it was the firefly who had guided them. When the snake was free, she looked at the firefly, grateful for her bravery and light. The snake, who had once mocked the small creature, learned that greatness is not always found in strength, but in helping and being brave. Moral: don't underestimate the value of others. Greatness isn't always in strength or size, but in brave actions. The Owl and the Eagle. Once upon a time, there was a majestic eagle flying through the skies, enjoying the freedom that came with the power of her wings. Every time she saw the landscape from above, she felt more proud of her ability to fly. One day, the eagle perched on a tree branch and saw an owl sitting there, watching her intently. The eagle, with her usual attitude of superiority, spoke to the owl and said, "Look at my high flight, how I can see everything around me with impressive ease. Why do you always stay here in the darkness, without flying freely like I do?" The owl, calm and wise, looked at the eagle and responded, "Your flight is certainly impressive, eagle, but perhaps you don't understand that freedom doesn't always mean flying high and fast. Each one has their own place and time to shine. I, for example, fly at night, when the darkness allows me to see things you can't see." The eagle, somewhat surprised by the owl's response, replied, "But what can you see in the dark that I can't see with my daylight vision?" The owl smiled with wisdom and said, "I can see what you cannot see, because I have special vision for the night. You who fly with the sun don't see the world the way I do. Life is full of different moments and perspectives. There is no one right way to be free, only many." The eagle, thoughtful, realized that the owl was right. Each one had their own way of living and experiencing the world. From that moment on, the eagle stopped boasting about her flight and respected the owl for his wisdom and way of life. Moral: every being has its own value and way of living. There is no one right way to be great. The diversity of perspectives enriches life. The deer and its reflection. In a meadow full of flowers and bushes, a deer walked calmly beside a stream. He was enjoying the day and admiring the beauty of the landscape around him. As he approached a small pond, he saw his reflection in the water. The deer was surprised by the image he saw. His long antlers were large and beautiful, while his legs seemed thin and weak compared to his body. How wonderful my antlers are, thought the deer, full of pride for his beauty and strength. But at the same time, his thin legs seemed unimpressive to him. He thought that if only his legs were as strong as his antlers, he could be an even greater and more admired animal. As he was absorbed in his thoughts, he began to hear strange noises behind him. When he turned around, he saw a hunter with a bow and arrow stalking him. The deer, scared, began to run quickly to escape. His legs, although thin, carried him at great speed, and soon he was fleeing across the meadow. However, in his rush to escape, the deer entered a dense forest. In his hurry, his antlers became tangled in the branches of the trees, preventing him from moving forward. Meanwhile, the hunter was getting closer and closer. The deer, frightened, realized his mistake. In his vanity, he had overvalued the importance of his antlers and had underestimated how valuable his legs were, which at that moment were allowing him to escape. In the end, the hunter caught up with him, and the deer learned a valuable lesson. Moral: don't be swayed by appearances and don't underestimate what really helps you in life. Sometimes what seems less important is what serves you the most. The Ant and the Dove. One hot summer day, an ant was walking along a dusty path looking for water. When she arrived at a small river, the ant, tired and thirsty, tried to drink, but she slipped and fell into the water. The current was strong, and the ant began to be swept away quickly by the river. From a branch of a nearby tree, a dove that was observing the landscape saw what was happening and decided to act. Without thinking twice, the dove broke off a branch from its tree and dropped it near the ant. The ant, seeing the floating branch, grabbed onto it with all her strength and managed to climb out of the water. The ant, grateful, thanked the dove for saving her and promised that one day she would return the favor. The dove smiled and told her that there was no need to repay anything. She had simply done what she felt was right. Days passed, and a hunter who was in the forest saw the dove perched on a low branch. Deciding to trap her, he took out a weapon and prepared to shoot. The ant, passing by, saw what was happening and quickly approached the hunter. Without thinking, she bit the hunter's leg, causing him to drop the weapon. The dove, hearing the noise, flew away and escaped from the trap. The dove, now safe, looked at the ant and thanked her. The ant smiled and said that she had only done what she had promised, to return the favor. Moral: kindness always comes back, and in life, we can all help each other, no matter how small or large we are. The Dog and the Bone. A dog was walking through the countryside when he found a large, tasty bone. The dog, very happy, took the bone in his mouth and began walking back to his house, imagining how delicious it would be to eat it in his favorite spot. As he walked, the dog passed over a bridge that crossed a small stream. Looking down, he saw his reflection in the water and thought there was another dog with the same bone as his, but much bigger. The dog, greedy, decided that he wanted that bigger bone and thought that if he took the bone from the other dog, he would have it for himself. Without thinking twice, the dog barked and jumped toward the reflection, opening his mouth to grab the bone. In doing so, he dropped the real bone he had into the water. The dog, realizing his mistake, dove into the water to search for the bone, but no matter how much he swam and searched, he couldn't find it. Finally, the dog returned to the shore, wet and sad, regretting having lost his bone by trying to get something he thought was better. At that moment, he realized that greed had led him to lose what he already had. Moral: don't be greedy, because in your desire to get more, you can lose what you already have. The Donkey Dressed as a Lion. Once upon a time, there was a donkey who had always been looked down upon by the other animals on the farm due to his simple appearance and clumsy attitude. One day, while strolling through the forest, he found a lion's skin lying among the bushes. The skin was old, but it still held the majestic look of the lion. The donkey, seeing the skin, had an idea. If I put on this lion's skin, maybe everyone will respect me and fear me, thought the donkey, excited. So he put the lion's skin over his body and began walking through the farm, trying to imitate the lion's stride. Immediately, the animals began to run away from him, frightened by the appearance of a lion. The donkey, enjoying the attention and the fear of others, began to boast and act arrogantly. But when the donkey tried to roar, instead of a fierce lion's roar, all that came out of his mouth was a loud bray characteristic of his species. Upon hearing the bray, all the animals quickly realized that the supposed lion was actually a donkey in disguise. The animals began to laugh at him, and the donkey, embarrassed, quickly took off the lion's skin and realized that appearance was not enough to gain respect or fear. True value came from behavior and honesty. Moral: don't try to be what you are not, because appearance does not deceive others. Respect and true strength come from being yourself. The wooden horse, Troy. The ancient city of Troy was being besieged by the Greeks. For years, the Trojans and the Greeks had fought without reaching an agreement, and the war seemed endless. The Greeks, unable to take the city by force, came up with a clever plan to enter Troy. One day, the Greeks built a giant wooden horse, hollow on the inside, where several soldiers could hide. After constructing it, they left it at the gates of Troy as a gift for the gods, as a sign of surrender and to gain divine favor. The Greeks then withdrew from the siege and retreated to a nearby island, leaving the wooden horse by the city walls. The Trojans, seeing the giant horse, thought that the Greeks had finally surrendered and left them a gift of peace. Believing that the war was over, they decided to bring the horse inside the walls as a symbol of victory. However, some of the wiser citizens of the city were suspicious, but most thought the gift was an act of goodwill. That night, while everyone celebrated the end of the war, a small group of Greek soldiers hidden inside the horse emerged quietly. They opened the city gates, allowing the entire Greek army, which had been waiting outside the walls, to enter. The Trojans were caught by surprise, and in the chaos, the Greeks took the city of Troy. The wooden horse became a symbol of the cunning and strategy used to win the war, and how blind trust can lead to defeat. Moral: excessive trust and lack of caution can be dangerous, and not everything that seems like a gift is what it appears to be. The oyster and the mouse. Once upon a time, there was a mouse who lived in a small cave near the sea. One day, while walking along the shore, he found a beautiful oyster that sparkled in the sun. Fascinated by its appearance, the mouse decided to try to open it to see what was inside. There must be something delicious inside this oyster, thought the mouse eagerly. He began nibbling at the oyster with his little teeth, but he couldn't open it. He tried and tried several times, but the oyster was tightly shut, as if it were completely sealed. He spent a long time trying without success, until he became exhausted and frustrated. Finally, he decided to rest under the shade of a nearby tree. Just then, a crab passed by and, seeing the mouse struggling with the oyster, approached him and said, "Why are you trying so hard to open that oyster? It's not going to help you. It's safe in its shell." The mouse, embarrassed, realized that the crab was right. He shouldn't be so concerned with something that wasn't meant for him. "Why don't you focus on what you can actually get?" suggested the crab. The mouse reflected on his words and left the oyster where it was. He decided to enjoy the little pleasures life had to offer, like the fruits that fell from the trees and the seeds he found along the way. Moral: not all efforts will lead us to what we desire, and sometimes it's better to focus on what we can actually achieve. The Girl and the Wolf. Once upon a time, there was a young girl who lived in a small village surrounded by a thick forest. She had always heard stories about the wolves that roamed the forest, but she had never seen one. One day, while walking along the edge of the forest, she encountered a large, fierce wolf approaching her. The wolf, with its shining eyes and terrifying gaze, spoke to the young girl. "What are you doing so close to the forest, little one? This is my territory, and no one should enter here without my permission," said the wolf in a deep voice. The young girl, scared but brave, replied, "I don't intend to harm anything. I was just passing by. If you let me go, I promise I won't come near again." The wolf, seeing her bravery, thought for a moment. After a long silence, he said, "Well, if you really don't want to cause trouble, you may go, but don't forget that the forest is dangerous. Don't trust too much in your luck." The young girl thanked the wolf for letting her pass and continued her way to the village. However, not long after, she encountered the wolf again, but this time he looked more threatening. The wolf, showing his sharp teeth, said, "I warned you not to trust your luck, and now I will show you why." The young girl, realizing she was in danger, thought quickly and started running towards her village as fast as she could. The wolf chased her, but she reached her house before he could catch her. The next day, the young girl realized she had learned an important lesson. Never trust completely in others, even if they seem friendly at first. The wolf had shown his true nature once he thought he could catch her. Moral: Don't fully trust those who seem harmless at first, as their true intentions may be very different. The Genie of the Lamp. Once upon a time, there was a young boy named Aladdin who lived in a small town. He was a poor boy who spent his days helping his mother with household chores. One day, a mysterious man approached him and offered a deal. The man told him that if he went to a secret cave and retrieved an old lamp, he could keep it as a reward. Intrigued and hopeful to improve his life, Aladdin accepted the offer. The man led him to the cave, where Aladdin found the lamp in a dusty corner. Without thinking, he rubbed it to clean it, and suddenly, a great genie emerged from the lamp. "I am the Genie of the Lamp," exclaimed the genie. "As a thank you for freeing me, I will grant you 3 wishes." Aladdin, astonished, thought for a moment. His first wish was for riches, and in the blink of an eye, his house was filled with gold and jewels. For his second wish, he asked to be taken to a grand palace, full of luxuries and servants. Finally, he asked for the love of the princess of the kingdom, whom he had fallen in love with at first sight. The genie granted his wishes, and Aladdin became a powerful and admired person. However, over time, the young man began to grow arrogant and greedy, forgetting his humble origins. Eventually, the evil sorcerer who had deceived Aladdin in the first place returned to steal the lamp and take control of the genie. Aladdin, with the help of his wit and bravery, was able to recover the lamp and, with it, the genie, who granted him one last wish, the chance to become a better person. Aladdin used his wish to bring peace to the kingdom and help others, earning the respect and gratitude of everyone. He learned that true power did not lie in wealth or material love, but in character and humility. Moral: power and wealth can be fleeting, but character and kindness last. True happiness is not found in material desires, but in the actions we take for others. The Elephant and the Chain. There was a circus that traveled through many towns, and one of its main attractions was a majestic elephant. Despite its enormous size and strength, the elephant remained chained to a small peg driven into the ground. After each performance, the elephant was tied to this peg with a chain. A young boy who attended the circus was fascinated by the impressive animal and couldn't understand why such a strong elephant couldn't free itself from such a tiny peg. One day, he decided to ask the circus trainer about it. "Why doesn't the elephant use its strength to break free and be free?" asked the boy. The trainer, with a smile, replied, "When the elephant was very young, it tried to free itself from the peg repeatedly, but didn't have enough strength to do so. Over time, it gave up. Now, even though it has grown and is much stronger, it still believes it can't break free. The belief in its inability keeps it imprisoned." The boy understood the lesson. Many times, our limitations don't come from what we can actually do, but from what we believe we cannot achieve. Moral: don't let your past limitations define what you're capable of doing today. If we believe in our potential, we can overcome the challenges we face. The Miller, his son, and the Donkey. Once upon a time, there was a miller who lived with his son in a small village. One day, the miller decided that it was time to sell the old donkey that was no longer useful for work at the mill. He and his son set off on the road to the city to sell the donkey. As they walked along the road, a group of people approached and commented, "Look how foolish they are. They have a donkey, and yet they could ride it. How ridiculous!" Embarrassed by the words of others, the miller and his son decided to get on the donkey. They continued their journey, but soon after, they encountered another group of people who said, "How cruel! They are riding a donkey while the poor animal has to carry everything. Don't they have a heart?" The miller and his son looked at each other, and to avoid more criticism, they decided to get off the donkey and keep walking. But ahead, they met a third group who said, "Why are you walking when you have a donkey to ride? You don't have common sense." Confused and trying to please everyone, the miller and his son thought the best solution would be to carry the donkey between them. So they lifted the donkey and began walking with it suspended between them. However, when they crossed the bridge over the river, they lost their balance, and the donkey fell into the water, disappearing downstream. The miller and his son, exhausted and sad, realized that they couldn't please everyone no matter what they did. Moral: you can't please everyone, and sometimes trying to do so just causes more problems. It's best to stay true to your own judgment and not be swayed by others' opinions. The Fox and the Woodcutter. Once upon a time, there was a fox who lived in the forest. One day, she came across a woodcutter who was chopping down trees. The fox, as cunning as always, approached the man and said, "Hello, good man. I see you're working hard. You must have great strength and courage to chop so many trees. But wouldn't you like someone to help you?" The woodcutter, surprised by the fox's kindness, replied, "What kind of help can you offer? You're just a fox." The fox smiled and said, "If you let me help, I could use my clever skills to find trees that fall more easily. It would be a great support for you." The woodcutter, thinking that the fox might be useful, accepted her offer. So, the fox began to look for fallen trees while the woodcutter continued chopping. But after a while, the fox got distracted. She saw a group of rabbits and decided to chase them, then heard some birds singing and wandered off to watch them. Meanwhile, the woodcutter, trusting the fox, didn't realize she wasn't helping anymore. When he noticed her distraction, the fox returned and tried to justify herself. "I'm sorry, but the rabbits distracted me, and the birds called my attention. I couldn't help it." The woodcutter, tired of her excuses, said, "Your cleverness doesn't mean much if you can't be consistent. Help must be reliable, not just convenient." The fox, embarrassed, walked away, realizing that cleverness can't always replace effort and dependability. Moral: cleverness and intelligence are valuable, but consistency, effort, and reliability are more important for achieving lasting results. The butterfly and the flower. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful flower growing in a colorful meadow. Its petals sparkled in the sun, and its fragrance filled the air, attracting butterflies that flew nearby. One of them, a delicate butterfly with bright wings, gently landed on the petals of the flower. The flower, feeling flattered by the butterfly's presence, said, "Dear butterfly, you make me feel so special. My petals are so beautiful, aren't they? I am the most beautiful flower in this meadow." The butterfly, smiling at her kindness, replied, "Your petals are wonderful, but did you know that real beauty lies in what cannot be seen? Butterflies don't seek flowers just for their color or fragrance, but because we have the gift of sensing what lies within a flower's heart." The flower, a little confused, asked, "What do you mean, butterfly?" The butterfly flew around her and landed again on her petals, saying, "The most beautiful flowers on the outside are often the ones that take the best care of their insides. The beauty of your heart is what truly attracts those who seek purity. I am drawn to your kindness. Your fragrance is just an expression of what you are inside." The flower, surprised by the butterfly's words, began to reflect. Grateful for the butterfly's wisdom, she realized that true beauty isn't only found in what is visible but in what a flower has inside: its kindness, its love for the world, and its ability to give without expecting anything in return. From that moment on, the flower not only took pride in her appearance but also made an effort to be a kinder flower, offering her beauty not just to the eyes but to the heart. Moral: true beauty lies in what one carries inside. What we see may impress, but what we feel and give to others is what truly matters. King Midas. In ancient Greece, there was a king named Midas, who ruled over a prosperous kingdom full of wealth. Midas was known for his great love of gold and desired to have more and more of this precious metal. One day, the god Dionysus, impressed by Midas' generosity, decided to grant him a wish. Without thinking much, Midas made an ambitious wish. "I want everything I touch to turn into gold." Dionysus, though he thought this wish was somewhat imprudent, granted it. Immediately, Midas touched his wine cup, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into gold. He was so excited that he touched more objects: tables, chairs, flowers, even the walls of his palace. Everything he touched turned to gold. However, he soon realized that this power was not as wonderful as it seemed. When he tried to eat, the food turned into gold, and he could not eat anything. He also tried to drink water, but the water turned to gold in his mouth. Seeing that everything he loved turned into something he could not enjoy, Midas began to despair. Desperate, he begged Dionysus to undo the wish he had granted. The god, seeing Midas' distress, agreed and told him how he could undo his golden touch. He had to bathe in the river Pactolus, whose waters had the power to reverse the wish. Midas did so, and when he emerged from the water, his power to turn everything into gold disappeared. The king had learned the valuable lesson that greed and excessive desire can bring more suffering than happiness. He no longer desired more wealth, and instead learn to value what truly matters: love, health, and happiness. Moral: the excessive desire for wealth can lead to dissatisfaction and suffering. It is important to value what truly matters in life and learn to be grateful for what we have. And that's the end of these wonderful stories. I hope you enjoyed each one of them and that their lessons stay with you throughout your day. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.